So I am a yoga teacher.
Brilliant. And what do you like about being a yoga teacher?
There are many things. I am mostly solely self-employed. So just from that, you get so much freedom. There are some cons being self-employed, but yeah, there are so many pros. I've never been self-employed before I was a yoga teacher, so there's a big difference. But with the job itself, you get to meet so many people in the profession that I am, and there's a lot of freedom with controlling your audience, I guess, which can, from a personal point of view, be very empowering. Because I know that sometimes when you're fully employed, so you don't always get that freedom to say no to certain things. So that's a big one. But yeah, I get to meet so many people, so many different walks of life, and it's like a constant reminder that we all are different and we all have different abilities. Like, there's no one size fits all to anything. Like, there's nothing that I can think of in my job where it's the same for anyone. And as well as that being good for my job, like for what I have to share, it's been life-changing for me personally, because I always think what I teach and what I share, I have to practice and have to live myself. So there's a lot of practice of acceptance and observation. So we observe the body, we observe the mind, we observe the breath, and how we can react in certain situations. I've found a quote before. No, you say what you say.
I was just going to say it's technical beyond like movement, isn't it? I think a lot of people think of it as movement, but actually it's quite a technical.
Yes. So in yoga, I think there's what you see on like social media for yoga is all movement, because that's the easiest thing that you can advertise, right? It's like the main thing that you can see is the body. You can't see the mind and you can't see the breath. But yoga, the movement part of yoga, is like the smallest part of the practice. It's the most accessible part most of the time. It's a tiny fraction. My dog's eating her food. I found a quote before about the practice from a teacher I follow on social media called Alexandria Crow. And she said, a yoga practice isn't meant to make you more productive so you can strive and attain things. It's meant to remind you that you don't need to attain anything to be worthy and whole.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, so it's like, I have to teach this in my work, but like I said, in order for me to teach it, I also have to practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I like that a lot. Okay, so how did you then get started within it?
So I started when I was at university. My best friend has many back challenges, and she's been practicing yoga for a really long time. I think since she was about 12, she was practicing yoga, the movement part of it. And then I found out that the university I was at had a yoga society. So I joined one of the classes. She's such a noisy eater. I joined one of the classes there from the society, and then the teacher who was running the classes that I was going to was like the most genuine, humble person I think I've ever still met in my life. And this was like 8 years ago now, and I still think she's up there.
Really?
Yeah, like after the end of every class, we all had to tidy up together, which was really nice because it builds a sense of community. But then, like, we'd all walk out of the room together, and she'd give us all a hug at the end, which I was just like, why doesn't everyone do this? Yeah. Like, it's just, and she asked permission before she gave you a hug. So it's like fully respecting everyone's agenda and agency. Oh, it was beautiful. But then, so when I finished uni, I had no intention of becoming a teacher, none at all. And then your mum saw that I was reading a book and was like, oh, why don't you do this teacher training? And I was like, not really, like, I don't really know. But then I slept on it and I was like, oh, what have I got to lose if I do it? And then I did it, and then I quit my job, and well, I was a postie at the time as well. So I quit my postie job to start teaching, and then it's just been the best journey ever since then.
Brilliant. So what would you say to anybody else starting out today?
With yoga?
With yoga, and obviously just trying to, manifest their ways through life.
Okay, so specifically to yoga, there's so many positive influences from social media and also so many challenging influences, and a lot of the time what we see on social media isn't real life in the yoga. So I get so many people coming up to me who I am assuming have seen these gymnasts and these dancers who are also yoga teachers, who also practice yoga, who are like hypermobile and they've got the most flexible body and they've got extreme range of motion. People come and say, oh, I can't do yoga because I'm not strong and I'm not flexible. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not strong and I'm not flexible. And I practice yoga every day of like my life, because yoga isn't just movement. Yoga's an aid of life. The movement is an aid of the yoga practice. The physical movement of the yoga practice, which we usually go to in a class, its main aim through like history and through the texts of yoga is to encourage a comfortable seat. That's all it is, to encourage finding stillness with the body, to find stillness with the breath and stillness with the mind. So for anyone starting out yoga, if you go to a class and you're intimidated and you think, oh my God, I actually can't do this, find another teacher, find another class. There's so many different kinds of yoga because there are so many different kinds of bodies, so many different kinds of personalities, so many different kinds of walks of life. So if something doesn't feel right, if you go to a class, it's literally not a problem. I've been to classes before when I've not enjoyed them and I felt intimidated. You just find another one. Like there's no problem about it. And I think because when it comes to movement and the body, there's so much stigma that you have to be perfect. But like that quote from before, yoga's not about being perfect, it's about knowing that you are already valid.
What would you say to someone trying to start out as a teacher, especially in the current situation?
The yoga teacher trainings, so there's so many of them. The most common one that I think is a 200-hour one, but you can also do foundational courses as well, I think. 200-hour yoga teacher trainings aren't aimed at teachers, they are aimed at people who want to be teachers. All you have to have, I think, is like a regular practice. So if you don't have a regular practice and you don't have a regular teacher, before you start out your training, that's what you need to find. And that's why it's important to recognize if that teacher or that class is really working for you. If it's not, then you just find another one and it's no problem. Always ask questions. This is my number 101 when it comes to teacher trainings and starting out as a teacher, because yoga is such a lengthy lineage, because it's such an old tradition. Some things that worked from when the practice started don't work now, especially translating from an Eastern society to a Western society. But there should never be any negativity when you ask questions. So it's okay to ask questions. If you're going to teach someone and you're preparing and dedicating your life to being a teacher, ask as many questions as you can. Like, if you want to know about certain things that's going to make you feel more comfortable to share it, then just ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no wrong, like that whole thing of saying there's no wrong answer, questions or answers, because that's how you navigate yourself, isn't it? And obviously, I know you you went abroad, didn't you, and you kind of did an extra training. Do you think that is necessary within yoga? Because obviously, like you were saying, how we've like navigated from the Western world to this world. You kind of actually went back to the roots of it, the roots. Do you think that's important at all?
I personally think it's very important to understand where the practice comes from, to be respectful of lineage, especially in a time where cultural appropriation is so prominent. I think it's really important. You don't have to go to India to respect the lineage of yoga. It's a nice way to go. You don't need to go abroad to do it, but I'd recommend, if you're going to do a training, always try and find someone that's not going to whitewash the practice. You just got to be respectful of things that have been passed on. And even whilst they might not be appropriate in today's world, they've still come from somewhere.
Yeah. I was going to ask you this about, like, obviously yoga it's become a lot more materialistic in a sense, and it's become part of the Western world too. There's a bit of like a vibe to it as such. Have you found that difficult to try and keep yourself grounded as a yoga practitioner? And also, I suppose in some cases you have to accept that these people are still doing what they do, but it does take away a lot from the practice, doesn't it? I guess at times.
It's really hard to navigate. Personally, I find it so difficult to navigate. And if someone was to ask me like straight off about yoga clothing brands and stuff, I'd be like, it's all a facade, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like really against it. But in times when I don't feel stable within myself, I find myself falling into what the yoga materialistic companies advertise. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, some of the clothing that's clothing specifically that associate themselves with the practice, I don't think they're always necessarily a bad thing, but I think you have to do your research, recognize maybe what influence they're having within the yoga community. Because if they're just doing it for the money, then I think you have to ask yourself, what's the point of them? And
it's hard. I think that's what and I think for a lot of people who maybe don't fully understand yoga, that is how a lot of them times they see bamboo.
And it's not always a bad thing. I mean, I remember I was watching an interview with the Dalai Lama, I think it was the Dalai Lama, about the mala bead wearing.
Okay,
they're like rosary beads, but for different religions like Buddhists and I think Hindus might use them. Don't quote me on that. But someone, I think an interviewer asked the Dalai Lama, how do you feel about people who don't use them spiritually wearing them? And the Dalai Lama said something like it didn't offend him at all, because they're still bringing awareness to the mala bead,
isn't it?
Which you'd hope then would lead maybe into more education and more research about them, and then maybe they use them for the actual purpose. So that's sometimes how I feel about yoga clothing and yoga brands. There's always that hope that someone who finds that materialistic side will do a bit more research. They'll go to a movement class, and then they'll maybe find the breath, and then maybe they'll find more the spiritual side and respect for the actual lineage and practice. But yeah, it's a really hard balance to find.
Yeah, but that's a nice way to think about it. I hadn't really taken that on board, that maybe it is just, it's a step. Obviously there is always going to be instructors and people out there who only want to go to your bog standard movement class, but actually the more people become invested in it, they might realize there's a lot more to it. And same for instructors. Instructors might start off in the same sense, but once they get to do more research and ask more questions, they can actually go further.
I don't think I'd be where I am now if I didn't ask questions about it. I mean, we all go through similar paths on how we get here. We all experience, I assume, similar things. Like I know many of my friends who are yoga teachers, they go through the same things about like different yoga brands, and then we hear stories and we're like, oh, maybe we should actually avoid them because they're not respectful of the practice. I mean, you can't avoid them because you put more effort into trying to avoid them because they're always going to be there. You have to find a personal way of how to navigate how you view the practice, I guess.